All right, hello everybody. How are y'all doing tonight? My name is Alan, and it's that time. Let's talk metal. Tonight, we're going to talk about one of the really well-known and well-respected new wave of British heavy metal groups, and it's going to be the Great Witchfinder General. Now, while this band is pretty well known and respected today, they're viewed as one of the seminal doom metal bands from the early 1980s that finally sort of picked up the torch from Black Sabbath and carried it forward. Hasn't always been viewed that way. The band's reputation over time has changed quite a bit. So I'm going to just sort of a look back at Witchfinder General and show off some interesting colored vinyl variants, because their stuff got pressed up on more than one color. So, little background on Witchfinder General. As I mentioned, today we think of them as this very important top tier doom band from the early '80s. But going back through older reviews and things like that, it doesn't seem like that's always been the case. Now, Witchfinder General was on the scene long before I was paying attention to it. When their albums were coming out in '82 and '83, my main concern in life was whether G.I. Joe could find a way to beat Cobra Commander. Spoiler alert, they always did. So yeah, I wasn't experiencing this firsthand. But from reading perspectives on the band, it seems like a lot of people didn't really view them that favorably. They weren't always cast in a very positive light back in the day. And it's worth noting that they were playing a very different style of heavy metal compared to a lot of new wave of British heavy metal bands. So to some people, they probably didn't quite fit in, drawing more on that Black Sabbath sound. They may have sounded a bit dated, while some of these other bands sounded more exciting, sounded of a newer sound for a new decade. I also get the sense that Witchfinder General didn't tour or play live very much, and that can affect people's perception that they never built up this really loyal fan base by playing shows every weekend and being out there touring a lot. Another thing that kind of affected the band's reputation in some people's eyes was I think some people had issues with the image of the band. Let's take a quick look at one of the album covers. They tended to have a history of portraying themselves, lots of, budget spent on the costume department, dressing up for things. They always seem to have young ladies their costumes were always in various states of disrepair. And I think a lot of people felt the image was a little bit corny. It's just like, oh, come on, really? Heavy metal folks will put up with a lot of stuff, but if you ever get a whiff of cheese, coming off that album, that's not a good thing. And a lot of people seem to have just considered the band a little too goofy, a little bit too cornball to be taken seriously. So yeah, like when I started, paying attention to heavy metal and collecting in the latest '80s and especially the early '90s, nobody paid attention to this band. I first heard about them in '92 because they showed up on this. I've shown this in other videos. It's the New Wave of British Heavy Metal '79 Revisited compilation. Lars Ulrich helped put this together for Metal Blade Records. It came out in 1990. It was supposed to come out in '89, but it got delayed a bit, so it didn't quite come out in time for the 10th anniversary. This was my gateway into New Wave of British Heavy Metal. And when I bought it at first, I had a cassette copy. The cassette is long gone. Pretty sure that disappeared with an old girlfriend. Womp womp. But eventually I replaced. I got it on CD, and on the CD there's a bunch of bonus tracks because it's a 2 CD set. And one of the bonus tracks that wasn't on the cassette is Witchfinder General's self-titled track. And so, when I got this, I'd already heard the stuff on disc 1 and disc 2. Lots of great stuff that really got me hooked. But among the bonus tracks, there was some good stuff. And that Witchfinder General track just blew me away. It's like, I've got to track down something else by this band. Because it mentioned in the booklet and liner notes that, they had done some stuff. So, I started looking for some of their stuff there in the early '90s. But at that time, nobody ever mentioned or referenced Witchfinder General. It was not a name you ever heard. I'd ask people about it, and they're just like, what? Who? It was only, serious new wave of British heavy metal collectors or vinyl dealers that dealt with a lot of imports that knew who the band were. And it was kind of that way through the '90s until you got into the 2000s when the band all of a sudden started to see their true metal street cred score just go through the roof. And I think it had a lot to do with this band. Reverend Bizarre got popular around that time. And of course, on the back of Crush the Insects, Hey, what's that t-shirt the guy's wearing? You know, let's be honest, we heavy metal fans have a habit of obsessing over what t-shirts band members wear, and when they wear something we're not familiar with, we take it as a signal as that must be cool, we should go check that out. And so, yeah, by the time we got into the 2000s, everybody was starting to reference Witchfinder General as a big influence, and they loved their music, and yeah, they were, godfathers of doom and stuff. I always take that with a little bit of a grain of salt, because through the 1990s, it was never a band you heard reference. They had kind of been, disappeared and been buried in time and dust, so to speak. But, they eventually got their due. I've got no problem with that, because I like the band a lot. But let's go back to the start then, check out some of their stuff. First thing that I want to note is a lot of their material is pretty easy to access. Yeah, I want to show you some of the old original pressings today, but a lot of them are not that hard or expensive to track down even now. And if you do have trouble finding them, the albums have been reissued recently. What I'm showing here is just the cover from a recent pressing of the second album. It's got different cover art on the back, so it's easy to spot that it's a reissue. But if you want to have material by this band, it's not hard to acquire. You can track it down without much issue. So the band got started and released their first piece of vinyl in 1981 as a 7-inch on the Heavy Metal Records label. Heavy Metal was a pretty well-established label in New Wave of British heavy metal circles. They had good distribution at the time. They signed some pretty popular acts. And this is reflected by the fact that, yeah, the albums are still relatively easy to find today and not very expensive. There's only a few things on the heavy metal label that command a higher price tag. So it's not a label that you want to break the bank and spend years searching to try to track down most of the titles. One of the rare items is the first Witchfinder General single, which is this one, came out in 81. It's got Burning a Sinner back with Satan's Children on it. Easy to spot, classic New Wave of British heavy metal picture sleeve with the black and white motif. Good single, like both the tracks on it. It did get bootlegged in 1996. King Fowley's Old Metal Records put it out as this, I think, the second thing that King issued on his label. And yeah, didn't technically have permissions for that. It was just a huge fan of the band, wanted to put it back out there. I think later they worked that out. The reissue / boot is pretty easy to spot because the color scheme is inverted. So instead of sort of black font on a white background, King Fowley's version has a white image and white font on a black background. So you're not going to get them mixed up. All right. Decent enough single to start out their career. Even some comments about the single, though, kind of show that there's a little bit of disparaging nature, some shade definitely thrown Witchfinder General's way. For example, I think it's in Malcolm Macmillan's New Wave of British Heavy Metal Encyclopedia. He, cites an old interview with the band where they were talking about that, part of their really heavy sound they have on that single is because they were new to a studio. They hadn't really done any recording. I don't think the band had any demos prior to this. And that, yeah, just in terms of working with the producer and such, they tried some things and the sound just came out really, really heavy. And Mount kind of treats it as like aha, I knew it. You guys weren't really that heavy. You were just incompetent. I was kind of like, okay, harsh. Maybe, yeah, they did kind of stumble upon the sound in the studio. But a lot of bands have tripped over neat little effects like that in the studio over time. But it just goes to show, again, a lot of folks, even disregarding whether they really had a doomy sound. Some people will still question that. But they got off to a start with the single, and Heavy Metal Records, had more interest in the band, so they had chances to record some other stuff. They showed up on some compilation albums. This one is weird cover, I know. Give me a second, I'll explain that. It's a compilation called Heavy Metal Heroes Volume 1. And yeah, it was a collection of stuff, bands that, heavy metal was working with. This is the first pressing, and yeah, it has this really weird red cover with just kind of, a stamped image on it. They did a second pressing where it got a real cover treatment, and it was more like I think it's a hand holding up a sword, and it's, very colorful. But yeah, this is the first pressing, and Witchfinder General is on side 2 with the track Rabies, which is a decent one. But yeah, it's got a lot of other pretty well-known heavy metal label bands on it, like Split Beavers on here, Dragster, Buffalo, Handsome Beasts, Twisted Ace, Grim Reaper, Jaguar Soldier, Bitches Sin has Strangers on the Shore, excellent song. And the obscurity on here is a band called Metal Mirror. So yeah, pretty good, solid lineup of bands on that comp. They also ended up including Witchfinder General on the Heavy Metal Heroes Volume 2 the following year in 1982. So they were getting some more exposure. And they ended up doing an EP in 82, which is called Soviet Invasion. And now that one I don't have a copy of to show off. I owned it once upon a time. It's one of the harder original Witchfinder General items to track down. I had it. It's never been my favorite release by the band. It's a 3-track EP, but yeah, if I remember, it's got Rabies, R.I.P., and Soviet Invasion. And Soviet Invasion is this very long track. It kind of plods along a bit. In terms of lyrically, it's just a little out of sync with most of the other stuff the band did. They did a lot of songs that were, either sort of, again, doomy, ooh, spooky themed, or just partying themed. And having this weird song about, fighting Russians just always seemed out of place in their catalog. Anyway, had it, traded it away. Somebody offered me a copy of this, and I said, deal. We'll save discussions of virtue for another night. But so yeah, I don't have an original Soviet Invasion EP, and I'm okay. It's the kind of thing I might pick up again one day, but I'm just not going to pay a whole lot for it. And it doesn't come all that cheap anymore. So anyway, after paying their dues with some compilation appearances, the single did okay, the EP did okay. The label finally agreed to give them a record deal, and so you got in 1982 their first album, which was called Death Penalty. A lot of fans are going to be familiar with this one. Again, spent a lot of time in the costume closet. And again, the lady didn't spend a lot of time in the costume closet. Naughty. What a lot of folks don't necessarily catch on to is that this album, again, it's not that hard to find versions of it today. And there were a lot of versions of it put out. Heavy Metal did some marketing on this. So what you're looking at here is an original picture disc copy. Then on the back, poor lady has, met an untimely end in the graveyard. Sad. But yeah, it's a very good album. Most folks cite it as their favorite of the two. It's got several solid tracks. Let's look over them quick. Invisible Hate gets things off to a good start. Free Country is cool. Death Penalty is a very rocking song. It's one of the best in their catalog. On the back, you have No Stayers, a little bit of an oddball one. Yeah, talking about loving them and leaving them. It's got the great self-titled Witchfinder General, which is one of the real anthems from the entire era. Burning a Sinner gets revisited here, and R.I.P. also. So a couple of songs that had already been out there, but a lot of new material too. Pretty solid release. Like the album a lot. It's one of the great ones. So you can get it on a picture disc if you fancy. If you're not into picture discs, and some people really aren't, a lot of people don't like the sound quality on them, you can pick up some other versions of it. So here again is an old copy of Witchfinder General. This is it on black vinyl. Now, a funny thing about this one, the black vinyl copies are actually the rarest ones. They're the hardest ones to track down for Death Penalty. And that's a little counterintuitive because most of the time, black vinyl is the standard issue, and it's all the other colors that are hard to track down. But in this case, no, the black vinyl, it can be a pain in the butt to find a copy of. You'll notice that, yeah, even the label design is going to be different than all the other versions I'm about to show you. So it's pressed up, different time, different labels, and in a much smaller quantity. This is the one that you most likely would have the most trouble obtaining. If you really only want black vinyl, this one is going to be a bit of a pain. Grab a drink here as I'm losing my voice. Been teaching all day. All right. Now, some folks really dig colored vinyl. And it turns out you've got a few options here. And again, these are all the original presses. If you just want the reissued versions, that's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with them. They look and sound good by all accounts. I haven't picked any of them up really because, as you want to see, I think I've got my bases covered pretty good for Witchfinder General. So again, if black vinyl is too hard to find or you want something that looks a little fancier. This one also came on clear vinyl. So the record's in there. It's not invisible, but yeah, just a clear vinyl copy. This is one of the more common variants. In my experience, the clear vinyl copies must have been pressed up in a larger quantity. Not that hard to track down one of those. All right, so if you want something that's a little easier to see, next cover, I've got this one out of the cover. So this is the only copy, you can get it on red vinyl, which looks really sharp. And there's the classic heavy metal record label. Let me spin that around so it's a little easier to see. You know, that's the label everyone knows with albums released on heavy metal records. So red vinyl copies, this one's a little tougher to find than the clear vinyl or the picture disc. Picture disc is not hard to find. Interestingly, of all the copies I've got, this is the only copy that has a printed inner sleeve with it, so that you've got, you know, band logo and lyrics on one side, and then you've got band photo along with the, oh, turns out the lady from the cover art survived. The graveyard picture wasn't a thing. And it gives everybody's name. I'm pretty sure I know which one Joanne is. But yeah, this is the only copy I have with the inner sleeve. I don't know if it only came with copies of the red vinyl version. That would be a little weird, but I guess it's possible. Maybe my only copies just, you know, the picture sleeve got lost over time. Can't imagine what would have happened to copies of this inner sleeve that might have caused them to be, let's go with damaged. I'm going to go with damaged. Yeah, I can't imagine what could possibly have caused copies of this to get damaged such that people had to replace them with plain white paper sleeves over time. But you can at least get some copies. Maybe it's only red vinyl, maybe it's others that do have that printed inner sleeve. All right, red vinyl, not your thing. All right, you can also get original copies of Death Penalty on blue vinyl. I think this one's probably the one I think looks the best. The blue vinyl just looks really sharp. It's a nice solid blue, stands out really well. So, yep, double checking, but yeah, that is your last option. So you've got picture disc, and then 4 different colored vinyl versions were printed up for Death Penalty. Why do I have all of them? I'm collector scum. I really like the album. I really like the band. All of the above. You take your pick. So that's the first album, but wasn't their last album. Witchfinder General was fortunate enough to get a second album deal. And again, in the new wave of British heavy metal scene, a lot of bands never even made it to the first album stage. So getting out 2 albums worth of material shows they did something right. You know, even if there were a lot of, you know, critics and naysayers about the band's image or style, they sold enough material to keep heavy metal interested in them for album number 2. And album number 2, in my opinion, is a little better. I think I'm in the minority on that, but whatever. My tastes are usually a little different from a lot of the rest of the heavy metal community, and I'm okay with that. So, Friends of Hell. This one is the first album I heard in full by the band. I heard this album before I heard Death Penalty. This is the picture disc original version. So again, really similar concept with the costumes and, you know, the ladies in distress. What we've got here in terms of track list, Love on Smack is a great opener, and it showcases the band moving towards just a little bit more of getting kind of an epic quality worked into the music. You know, the song's a bit longer, has kind of a interesting, twisted little story going on to it, but works really well. Last Chance is good. Music is probably the one sort of dud on the album. It was released as a single, and the single has an interesting variant where it came on this kind of silver mirrored vinyl. I'm not going to show that to you today. I used to have a copy of it, and I traded it to Jeff Wagner, the guy who used to run Metal Maniacs magazine. Traded it to him years ago, back in the Metal Maniacs days, because it wasn't my favorite song by the band. The song on the B-side was not exclusive or anything, so I was happy to let Jeff have it since he was interested in it. Back to the track list here. Friends of Hell is another one that has, you know, shows them following this more of an epic track, you know, with the story of, you know, spooky occult things going on, but it's a really, really good song, changes pace a few times really well, builds up nicely. All the tracks on side 2 are solid. Requiem for Youth, Shadowed Images. I Lost You, some people may not be keen on that one. It is a little slower, kind of semi-ballad track, but it's got a good mournful quality to it. It definitely, is fair game for a doom metal song. And then closes up with a Quietest Reprise. So again, both albums are excellent. I prefer this one just a little bit over the first one. And it may just be that this one has a little more material on it, whereas the first album's a bit shorter. So yeah, you can get a picture disc of this, just like you get picture discs of Death Penalty. If picture discs are not your thing, at least some copies of this, again, came in a regular cover with a printed sleeve. Now, this time you just get lyrics on both sides. I guess Joanne wasn't available for this photo shoot. Sad. But this is just standard black vinyl. And this time the black vinyl is pretty normal. It's not especially rare like it was with the Death Penalty release. Right. And so again, this is just the regular cover. Now there's the original back cover picture. So again, they changed this when it was reissued on Buried by Time and Dust Records. If black vinyl is not what you're after, okay, now this next one's got a little telling to do. You can get it on clear vinyl. Now what I'm holding up right now doesn't look very clear. It kind of looks like a brown or goldish colored vinyl. This is clear vinyl. When I bought, this was the first Witchfinder General album I bought, got it in the summer of '93 from a mail order catalog. It was perfectly clear. The clear vinyl copies of this album have a tendency over time to change color to this kind of brownish color. I'm going to go with brown. If you want to call it gold or honey colored or whatever, whatever. But I bought this album in 1993, and it was just as clear as the copy of Death Penalty that I showed you a while back. So now it's almost 30 years later, and yeah, it has slowly and gradually changed colors over time. When I took it out, like around 2005, 2006, parts of it were starting to turn brown, but parts of it were still, very translucent. And now it's, I got that brown color completely across it. Reason I'm stressing this is that you will still see clear vinyl copies listed for sale. Every now and then you'll see somebody list copies on eBay, citing that, super rare gold vinyl version or brown vinyl version that's not listed in any of the discographies anywhere. The reason it's not listed in any of the discographies is it was not pressed this way. This is aging. I don't know why. I'm guessing it's something about the batch of, vinyl they used to press these up. But, something about it oxidizes over time, reacts with sunlight or humidity. I have no idea why it's doing this. I take pretty good care of my records. They've always been sleeved. They've, in normal houses and apartments. No, I don't keep them in a bank vault, climate controlled and free of everything. But I haven't left this sitting out in the sun for years. It's not been, in a basement exposed to, high levels of humidity or anything like that. It's been standing up on my record rack, sandwiched in between all the other copies of Friends of Hell for, almost 30 years. And that reaction has slowly occurred. Don't know why. TLDR, if you are sort of a completist about these things and you're trying to get all the different colored versions, don't be fooled into thinking you need a clear vinyl copy and one of these brown vinyl copies. It's the same pressing. This one is just not aged as well. I guess some of the clear vinyl copies, something about them hasn't changed. They maybe it's the difference of being in an acid-free paper sleeve. I don't know. Could the sleeve really have altered it that much over 30 years? Hasn't done it to any of my other clear vinyl records, so don't know what's going on. But again, it is not a unique variant. It wasn't pressed that way. All right. If that's just too confusing and you want something different, there's another version that you can get. Friends of Hell was made this way. Now, these copies came without a cover, which again is a little weird when you see them listed. It's like, why is it missing the cover? Well, it actually didn't come with a cover because they wanted people to be able to see in the store that it had this kind of very shiny, I've seen it referred to as mirrored vinyl. To me, it just kind of looks like silver vinyl, but yeah, you can kind of see a reflection in it. So you want to call it mirrored? Okay, I got no problem with that. But that's the other version that you can get. So with Friends of Hell, you have the picture disc, the clear vinyl, and the black vinyl. Same things you had for Death Penalty. But for Death Penalty, you can also then get you can also then get red or blue vinyl. Friends of Hell, the only other version you can get is that mirrored vinyl. So those are all the versions that came out back in the day. Now, I'll go ahead and start wrapping this up. Witchfinder General, again, has had a bit of a renaissance in the 21st century. Some things have helped that along the way. In 2006, they had a reissue done. I'm trying to think, was this on Nuclear War Now? Let me check here. No, Buried by Time and Dust and Nuclear War Now. Okay, yep. Put out a live set of material by the band. This is available both on vinyl and CD. If you go to get a CD, something you have to watch out for, the first pressing of the CD, the sound mastering got all screwed up. And it basically, when you play it, it sounds like you've taken a 45 RPM record and you're playing it at 33 RPMs. So they sound really slow, even by Doom standards. Like, that's a little too slow. So yeah, they quickly you could send it back in and they would send you, a copy once they got the sound problem fixed. But there's probably still, a fair number of those first pressings floating around out there. So do be careful if you pick it up. This copy has the right sound, but I don't know if there's an easy way to tell them apart just by looking at them. So buyer beware if you want that, but it's cool to hear a live set by the band. The following year, 2007, they also had a nice collection put out. This one has the EP and the single on it, and then also some live tracks early on from 1981. Yeah, check out that band lineup there. One of these guys doesn't exactly fit into the heavy metal stereotype the way the other band members do. So yeah, not sure what the bassist is doing there, but kind of looks more like a Glee Club school picture than Witchfinder General True Doom kind of band picture. But it is a nice collection if you want to hear those earlier, harder to find pieces of vinyl and a few extra tracks. Let's take a quick look here. I'm thinking there's one unreleased track as I knock stuff off my desk. Yeah, you got Satan's Children, Rabies, Soviet Invasion. Yeah, Phantasmagorical. This was the first time that song was available to most folks, unless you had, some kind of live bootleg from back in the day. All right. Witchfinder General also then, with a lot of hype and, every band imaginable sort of name dropping them in the early and mid 2000s as this huge Doom influence. Well, the guys decided it was time to get the band back together and give it another go. And in 2008, they released, their third album, Resurrected. Boy, Resurrected is a perfect example of why some bands are better off leaving the legacy of their band alone. It is not a good record, and it pains me to say that. I'm obviously a big fan of Witchfinder General. I was very interested to see what the reunion project was like. Yeah, they made an album, and if I ever hear it again, it's not going to be because I intentionally tried to. It's just sometimes you can't go back, and it was one of my textbook examples for me of why I have a hard time getting interested in some reunion projects. That too much time passes. You've got one or two members, of course, inevitably have to be replaced, and 9 times out of 10, in my experience, the reunion it doesn't add anything for the fans. You just can't go back and do it again. Again, it's their band. They can record as much as they want to or not, but for me, that so did not work. And I think it was pretty universally panned. They didn't do any further recordings after that. So I think the message got through. It was just like, Thanks, but no thanks. We're good just enjoying the old stuff. You don't really have to record anything new for us. We're good here. It's okay. So that's a quick look at Witchfinder General and some of the kind of neat different stuff that was pressed up back in the day for them. So let's wrap this up and let's talk metal in the comments down below. What's your favorite Witchfinder General song? Did you hear this band getting a lot of praise and attention back in the 90s and I was just in the wrong place and hanging out with the wrong crowd and nobody I ever talked to knew about them? Let me know, leave a comment down below, and with that, let's wrap this up. So until next time, keep banging your heads.